I'll start it now. Just so.
Translation.
Okay. Just be careful during the actual webinar too of when you're placing things down to try and do it softly, just to cut down on the kind of banging around as well.
E appoggiare proprio lentamente, se no senti
Di appoggiarlo piano, sì.
lentamente sul tavolo, sì.
Yes.
Non hai una gomma più in modo da...
sì, mollettone.
Okay. If you could take your seats, everybody, and get ready. We're kind of getting into the final countdown here.
Francesca, vieni perché sta per iniziare. Devi sederti. No, fa più rumore quello poi. Yes, 2 minutes left.
Dimmi poi, Franci, quando è il momento di condividere la presentazione.
Good luck.
Subito. Thank you, Beth.
Subito.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to see you, and I know it'll be great.
Cross the fingers.
Quando tu arrivi con il tablet, che hai fatto introduzione, poi giro con il tablet, come tu arrivi col tablet, io condivido la presentazione.
Okay. Yep. Everybody prepare. Just a minute to go. You guys could just, like I said, remain silent until I pass it over to you. The cue will be welcome, Gloria and Francesca, and then that's your cue to start. Good luck, and we'll be going live in just a few moments.
Sì.
Okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning and welcome to the 2022 Be Original Americas Virtual Student Fellowship. We are super excited to kick off this year's week of programming this morning with Alessi. Some quick housekeeping. There will be a Q&A session following the presentation. You will find the button to submit a question at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. Please send in your questions as you think of them. There's no need to wait until the end. We will get to as many of them as time permits. If we don't get to your question, it will be addressed personally by email after the presentation. Now, I am happy to introduce today's speakers. Francesca Appiani earned a degree in philosophy specializing in museology and has worked on freelance museum projects since 1997. She began her collaboration with Alessi the same year, helping to create the company Museum, where they are today. Excuse me. She curates most of the exhibitions organized by Museo Alessi and has written numerous articles and papers on Alessi history and design. Gloria Barcelini graduated with a degree in architecture from the Milan Polytechnic and began her collaboration with Alessi in 1994. She is currently assistant Metaproject and supports the management and selection of new collaboration proposals in the development of special projects. Welcome, Gloria and Francesca.
Thank you. Thank you for your invitation. We are very happy to be here. And first of all, we would like to introduce you the space in which we are. It's our museum archive. And now I show you it briefly. Okay. In this space, we store about 30,000 objects. Most of them are prototypes. You can see the history behind the products. We've bought many prototypes about objects that we never produced. They are important documents about our research. And we organize our collection in this way because this space had to be a tool available for our research, for the development of the new project, so for our technical department, for Gloria, for all the people involved in the development of the new project. Okay. Okay. For this presentation, we thought to describe you some values, the values that we selected to celebrate our century. Last year, we celebrate our first 100 years, and we, in order to celebrate it, we talk about 12 values that guided our research in the field of the applied art. Sorry. And but first of all, allow us to short introduce our history. Okay. The history of Alessi. There is something. Okay. This is where Alessi is. We are in the north of Italy, 100 kilometers far from Milan. It's a beautiful area, full of lakes, as you can see in this photo. And the first our technical department, our first machinery. We continue to use them with a different spirit. After we describe you one of the most important values that this is our museum where we are. Maybe it's better to see in this part of the video. And this is our shop in Milan. In this video, we describe the process of a product from production to the shop. Now there is the part that I prefer in this movie, Alessi people. Because Alessi is a benefit corporation and this is one of the most important parts of our company, people. Okay. So the history of Alessi, we can describe it in short through 3 steps. At the beginning, in 1921, Alessi was a very small workshop. They produce objects using soft metal, for example, brass. And you can see our first logo, FAO. The meaning is Fratelli Alessi Omegna, Alessi brothers in Omegna. And second step, with the 2 sons of the founder, Ettore and Carlo Alessi, they transform the workshop, the father's workshop, in a real industry. They started to use stainless steel, and during this period, Alessi was a company specialized in objects for bars, restaurants, and hotels. They changed the logo. The name of the company was Alfra. Again, Alessi Fratelli, Alessi brother. And during this period, the most important values were functionality and durability, because they produce professional objects, professional items. And the third step, the one developed by Alberto Alessi, 3rd generation inside the Alessi family. He joined the company in 1970, and he's still working with us. And he is the person who has had the vision to start to work with external designer, to start to focus the Alessi research on other values than functionality and durability. This is the history that I described you. I've just described you in 3 steps, from the 20s until now. Would you like to add something?
No. We just put a picture showing this last transformation from the industry to a design company that shows Alberto Alessi and his uncle Ettore at Salvador Dali house in Spain, because it was the beginning of a long story. It was the beginning of a huge transformation, because the first project Alberto wanted when he was starting working here at 24 years old was to invite pure artists to design a sculpture. So it was a huge transformation from an industry producing stainless steel for pubs, objects for pubs and restaurants. And so I just wanted to underline the picture just to explain it and the meaning of that.
Yes, we choose this photo because it's really clear to express the vision that Alberto had. He started to look at the objects in a completely different way compared to the vision of the father and the uncle. And through this project, he declared it in a very, very strong way.
It was a flop in terms of economics, because a huge flop, but it was even a huge transgression in the history of design, in the history of this company, and also started a real new period, and people started looking at Alessi in a very different way. From that moment up to now, Alberto started a very long cultural research on languages, on creativity, because his ambition is not just to satisfy the need of people, because through the objects, but is to arrive to satisfy even the dreams of people. And to do that, he wanted to bring some art and poetry into everyday life, with the everyday objects. And as Francesca anticipated, we would like also to talk with you about the 12 main values that made this new identity of Alessi. Alberto Alessi brought those values into our practice, which is the design practice that we bring and that we have nowadays. Yes, we in the picture, this is a nice sentence that summarizes the vision of Alberto, because a work of design shouldn't be neutral, should move emotions, should create a deep link between the objects and people. In fact, we generally also inside our practice, we never use the word target, because target has probably not the correct meaning, or is not so precise compared to what we would like to do, because we would like, generally speaking, to create objects for people in general. So,
people and public also.
In public. So we like to investigate on different languages and work on different fields of creativity, just to touch the emotions, the soul, the deep life of everyone who could be touched in some way from those objects. And the other element that the other issue that we immediately introduce is the description of who we are. We are not an industry, but we are more similar to a research lab in the field of applied arts applied to industry. So we don't deal just with arts. We are dealing with the arts applied to industry. So yes, we work with objects that could bring to people some of these ingredients, which is art and poetry.
If you think about us in these terms, you can understand better in depth, we can say, this phrase of Alberto. We try to produce objects able to create the same experience that you've got when you are in a museum surrounded by paintings or sculptures. When you use our objects, of course, you use a functional object, you use a teapot, a coffee maker, or a kettle, but at the same time, they are able to provoke something in your soul, bring back memories, surprise, convey feelings, etc., exactly like an artwork. And with this slide, we can and this short presentation of Alessi in terms of art mediator between, as Gloria just said, between the most interesting aspect of the contemporary creativity and the people dreams.
Yeah. During our 100 years of activity, we were working with many different artists, designers, architects, graphic, fashion designer, musicians. Just to give you numbers, to have an idea of this huge collaboration, we could say that we were able to put in production at least more than objects designed by more than 300 different designers.
Yes.
It means that the collaboration are even more, and we are always open to collaborations because we don't have any design office within the company, but we have technical offices where we have the responsibility to bring an original concept up to the production. But the creativity is coming from outside. So we are a kind of gallerist or art mediator who is looking for the best creativity worldwide and select it and bring it to the public. That's our role. So we try to create here the best conditions for creativity to be expressed, to be understood and expressed.
So the Alessi values.
Let's start this list, and we hope that through the values, at least you will have a more precise idea of who we are and what we can do.
This is what I just mentioned when we were watching the video. We are an industry, but at the same time, we are a craftsman's workshop because, of course, we use the machineries in order to produce our objects, but with the spirit of the craftsman. So we use we don't use the design as a simple tool conditioned by the needs of the industrial production, but exactly the opposite. We forced the industrial process in order to satisfy the needs of the designer. And this is very close to what we said about art. You can't force an artist in order to create what you would like to have, but you have to wait for his or her creativity. And this is exactly the point of our approach. I forgot to tell you that we use for this presentation some images, some photos of an exhibition that we organized during the Design Week in June, last June in Milan. In this exhibition, we described these 12 values, and this was the room. We organized 12 rooms, each dedicated to a different value, and this is the room of industrial craftsmanship. Behind my colleague, you can see some of the prototypes that we've got here in this archive, and they are the evidence, the clearest document that we can show in order to talk about this aspect of our approach of our activity.
Mm-hmm. We also selected, just to explain better the value, one of the projects that best embody the value. And in fact, in the next slide,
Non mi sta funzionando.
in the next slide, you will see, yes,
okay.
This is a collection of wooden objects designed by Ettore Sozzas. Of course, they are produced in wood and almost by hands nowadays, and with the spinning technology. And we launched that project last year just to speak also about industrial craftsmanship in some way, but it was a project belonging to our collection, because our museum represents a real richness for us, because we are, as Francesca said, surrounded by concept objects. Not all the concepts that we developed entered the production. So here we have a real treasure of ideas and concepts that maybe one day will be able to enter the production.
This is another example of what we would like to describe with this value, because these tea sets designed by Sana, from the technical point of view, our industrial process was almost impossible. It was almost impossible to produce it. However, our technical department managed to find, investing months, managed to find the solution in order to put in production this peculiar shape, put in production and produce
industrially.
With our machinery.
Because it is the shape has a lot of undercuts, so it would be impossible to produce, but at least forcing the machines, it was possible.
Art, this was the room dedicated to the value of art, and we describe this value, so we can continue. And these just to just to tell you in short what is this vase. This vase is a part of a project that Alessi organized at the beginning of the 90s, inviting 100 different, not only designers, we can say artists, creatives, in order to image the decoration. And among them, you can find musicians, as Gloria mentioned before, but this isn't the only project with creatives, not only designers, but this is one of the most interesting and clear example of this kind of approach. We've got musicians, fashion designers, we've got painters, of course, sculptors, etc.
Yes.
Paradox.
Well, paradox, of course, as the word says, is to be able not to stay on the main road, but to explore different roads, and creating also something really unexpected, and sometimes even bizarre. We use as a project this toilet brush designed by Stefano Giovannoni, and we made it in gold, just to emphasize this paradoxical or paradoxal attitude that sometimes we have to create real unexpected projects, because we would like to transform the normal into something extraordinary, the ordinary into the extraordinary experience, even through the objects.
Yes, when Alessi presented these objects at the beginning of the 90s, it was very strange. It was very strange that a designer design this kind of objects. Usually the design objects are different and not so simple typologies. And we forgot to tell you that when we celebrated our centenary, we talk about these 12, we describe, we communicate these 12 values, and we choose in our archive a project able to, or an unpublished version of a previous product, able to represent the values. For example, in this case, the gold version of this toilet brush.
Beyond. Beyond means always not to stay fixed on your position, but always to look further, look beyond, because even the rule of the objects is not so, could be more than an experience. Here you can see here, but maybe it's not
it's not
so easy to see. But we use this object because it is a bowl designed by Susan Cohn. She's an Australian artist working with metals. And she designed that bowl thinking about the rule of the bowl and the experience that you can have. The bowl is realized as made out of two meshes together that could create a moire effect. But the rule of the object is something more than being just a bowl, is an experience, because the light comes through creating very nice patterns. And even the object is not fixed, but is always dancing on your table. So you live an experience. You don't just have an object in front of you. So that's the meaning of what beyond is, to go always, to try to go further and make something deeper also in the relationship with the objects. This is not just a fluid bowl, it is an experience itself, in itself.
Or a work of art.
Yes.
Thingness is another value. Not all the designers who work with Alessi have this talent. Among them, for sure, Enzo Mari had this talent to find out, to go to the essence.
Yes, to go to the essence of the object. Yes. That is not easy at all.
Yes, and in order to represent this value, we put in production a very essential nutcracker designed by Enzo Mari. The name is Farfalla. You can see it in this slide, and also the room of our exhibition in Milan, in which in a very essential layout we displayed it. Mm-hmm. The name is Farfalla. Farfalla in Italian means butterfly.
And is the technical name for this shape, is a technical part
of yes, of this technique. How can I say
element?
Yes, element. Sorry, I don't remember the name in English.
Yes.
Okay, research lab.
Well, a research lab is one probably of the most precise value that we would like, that could describe what we are. Yes. Because as we anticipated, we consider ourselves not just an industry, but a research lab in the field of arts applied to industry, as we said. We work with many different designers. We were always working, especially in looking for new languages and making experiments to explore new paths, new languages that could bring some of the contemporary feeling to everyday life. The picture shows a selection of coffee makers, because only in the in this issue, only on this topic, for instance, we made a huge research with many different designers and architects on the identity of the coffee makers. And the result was enormous reach of enormous examples of different solutions to interpret these quite simple typology. But we use this attitude of being a research life in all our activity. We are always looking for something that could explore the future, the immediate future, for instance.
I forgot to tell you that if you visit our archive, this is really clear, because we divided the objects on the base of the function. So in the same cabinet, in the same windows, you can find all the coffee makers produced by Alessi, but also the suspended projects about this typology. So you can have an idea about how rich is our research, and also the design approach, because you can find the different developments, and through the different developments you can try to guess, to understand the different designers' approach.
Yes, the creative process, which is different from one to the other, because we don't like just to embrace one way of do design, because we like to explore different approaches, different behaviors of different designers, because the design is has a multi-faces identity, and our rule is to give the possibility to this multi-faces identity to be expressed properly. Then the next, poetry.
Poetry is very close to art and poetry. This is the capacity of the objects to convey feelings, we can say. And in the exhibition, we display research, one of the most poetical research that Alessi had in his history, a research by Riccardo D'Alisi in order to design a new Napolitan coffee maker. So Riccardo D'Alisi was a very versatile artist, because he was an architect, but he was also a designer.
He was also
a poet. He wrote beautiful poems on coffee makers, and in the exhibition we had an actress, and she
was reading.
Yes, she played. She played the beautiful poems written by Riccardo D'Alisi. Now I show you some of these beautiful prototypes.
Yes, we made in this research more than 200 different prototypes. This is a horse. Yeah, the possibility to work on a coffee maker, it was just a starting point to explore different identities, characters, and so on. Imagine that in our museum we have more than 200 different characters and models of Napolitan coffee makers. Yes. Yes, very different, cute, humoristic, and with a lot of humors, and yes, he's a singer. Very an enormous treasure of these objects.
And this is a process that he used in order to design the final objects, the final products.
That was made out of stainless steel compressed. Those are made of copper, tin, and so on.
Yeah, he called this process animazione, the animation. So we can say that he put a soul into the object that he would like to design, and thanks to this animation, he arrived to the final projects. And this approach is completely different from
all the other.
And if you visit our museum, for example, and see the part of our collection in which we've got the prototypes of the coffee makers, you can see how different are these approaches.
For instance, another coffee maker designed by Aldo Rossi, this octagonal, was very similar to a building. I don't know if you see, okay, here. So because his poetic was more related to the architectural dimension, to bring the architectural dimension into everyday objects. So everyone has a really a very, very different approach to design. And in our 100 years of activity, we try to explore as more as possible very, very different approaches and languages.
Okay, these are, we can continue. Okay, irony is another values that you can find in some of our objects, not all, but for sure Achille Castiglioni was one of the most ironic designers that we've got in our history. And
yes, because he was not designing in a conventional way and also in a stylish way, but he was always able to create a link, and sometimes even an ironic link, with something that was not belonging to the identity of the object that was going to design. Like in this that you see on the right side of this slide, this kettle in the shape of a stone. Curling stone.
Yes, he saw in the curling stone the perfect kettle, because the body is very big, so
bold.
Very bold, and the handle is extremely functional in order to keep the kettle and move it in a safety way. And this was one of the characteristics of Achille Castiglioni, because he moved some elements from an object to a completely different other object, some functional details from one field to another field. In some cases, this translation was able to create an ironic dimension of the design.
Borderline. The borderline is also another key factor of our practice. The borderline is in the vision of Alberto an invisible line. Unfortunately, it is invisible, which is separating the possible from the not possible. So and that divides the things that people would like to have from things that people wouldn't like to have. So we, as a design company, we work around this borderline, taking also the risk to make something wrong and to enter in the wrong area, but even taking the possibility and the challenge to be exactly on the line, and even sometimes being able to push it a little bit further. Because with some projects, we are also able, like in this case, because when Philip Stark suggested Alberto to do this lemon squeezer. It was something crazy, unexpected. And in this case, the object was so strong unexpectedly, but it was so strong that it was also able to push it a little bit further, this borderline, and was a great success. Not always we are so lucky to find very objects that has this strength and this and has the capability to go further in this practice and to push it a little bit further. Because in the same year, Philip Stark also suggested Alberto to do this kettle. It was called Hot Bertha. And the object was a flop because there was an important limitation inside the kettle, that after a while a system that was opening and stopping the exit and of water was stopping from the stuff in the water itself, and it was not easy to clean it up. So the object became a flop in few years. But it is unbelievable, but it is still an icon for the design victims. Stark called the people who is extremely in love with design, sometimes the design victims. But still nowadays, even if they know well that the object is almost impossible to use, we are receiving requests to have this product still in production. So what's the step further? The step further up the borderline is that our practice is to be effective in creating most advanced, yes, yet acceptable objects. So we are always working around that borderline, which is a very critical line and a critical area. In fact, the mass production companies, they try to stay as far as possible from this very risky area. But to be there is also the rule of a design company. A design company has this rule of being there and explore the future.
So hybridization is another important component of our research. A mix of disciplines, cultures. We talked before about the project with the 100 different creatives. One of the first project in which Alessi made this mixing was the Tea and Coffee Piazza project, in which the mix was between design and architecture. At the end of the 70s, Alessandro Mendini suggested to Alberto to try to work with architects. Why? Because he was sure that among the architects, Alberto could find some new talents as a designers. But this idea belongs to the history of the Italian design, because the Italian design started, the history of Italian design started when a group of architects, Gio Ponti, Albini, Sozzas, etc., stopped working as an architect, and they started to design objects. And they invited a group of pure architects who never designed objects. Among them, there was Michael Graves and Aldo Rossi. And they asked them to design a tea and coffee set, because the tea and coffee set can be considered like a small architecture, because the tray is like a square, and the teapot, the coffee pot are like buildings. And so they thought that the architects could find something familiar in this topic. And these, for example, these two sets are the final result. And 20 years after this project, Alessi organized another research with a new generation of architects. Among them, there was Future Systems, Greg Lynn, and Zaha Hadid, exactly like in the first project. After this project, Alessi founded new collaborations. After the first project, Alessi started to collaborate with Michael Graves and Aldo Rossi. And after the second project, presented in exactly 20 years after, the Tea and Coffee Piazza was presented in 1983, and the Tea and Coffee Towers was presented in 2003. The title changed because after 20 years, the architects stopped designing flat squares, we can say, but they started to
skyscrapers.
Yes, design skyscrapers, yes, towers. And after this project, we run some new interesting collaboration, for example, with Zaha Hadid or David Chipperfield. Transgression.
11.
Yes, last but not least, transgression. In art, you have to be, you have to, yes, to
break the rules,
to not respect the rules. Also in our field, and we've got 3 different kind of rules. First of all, technical rules, the rules that we have to follow in order to produce the objects. Marketing rules, and don't care about the market, because if you would like to be an innovative producer, if you would like to put in production something unexpected, you can't use market and aesthetic. For example, if you think about the like Africa is designed by example about the turn of the marketing rule. When Alessi put in production this kettle, the main market was Italy. And at that time, I mean at the beginning of the 80s, in Italy, people used to drink coffee made with espresso coffee maker. This typology was not very far. Yes, not very well known. However, Alessi liked this spot, decided to put on this kettle, seller the design because of his capacity to put a link in with the people. These objects remind me, and I would like to tell you, Alessi in a permanent in the museum, but also in many places. However, Alessi doesn't use product place. is an evidence that your party life of people. When we knew that we know that a human this is the time that we are able to produce artwork.
The last value that is like to show you with this about the future and the future, and when the technology and design could work together. Just the two like with the of that speaking.
The future is a form of history that hasn't happened yet. The past is a future that already happened. The present moment vanishes before it can be described. Language is a human invention that lacks the power to fully adhere to reality. But we have to say something about the future because we have to live there. To be futuristic is to perform the future for somebody. It's an act of communication. The future is not a noun, it's a verb. And it's a process, not a destination. So it's simple, we will never stop futuring. Václav Havel said, hope is not a vague longing that things will turn out well. It's the conviction that what you are doing makes sense no matter how things turn out.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. we hope that we managed to explain our soul, through these values, our approach. We waiting for you here in our archive if you would like to see live our collection and talk with us about the objects.
Thank you both very much. We appreciate your time. We are a little short on time, but I did want to get to a couple of the questions for the Q&A, and we'll run through as many as we can. But for those of you who have asked questions, if we don't get to them today, we will follow up by email and address them personally after
Of course.
the call. So the first question that I wanted to just kind of jump right into is, where and how do you find inspiration?
Inspiration for the creativity, you mean? Well,
yes.
We are basically inspired by the designers and the creativity itself. We receive an enormous amount of spontaneous contacts and spontaneous offer of collaboration through projects, and we select the most interesting ones. And on the other side, we can even give out a brief to designers who have been already working with us. But we like to explore and to see the creativity, thinking about this present moment, and even thinking about the future. We are evaluating many aspects, of course, the technical aspects, because if it's something feasible, if it's working, but mainly we evaluate especially the imaginary ability of the designers to bring us in their imaginary world, and how they are able to describe the present moment and let us to be part and to feel to be in this present moment through their creativity.
And how do you ensure that the designs of these collaborations stay true to Alessi and the Alessi brand while still allowing the designers to express and create the way they want?
Well, when we work with the designers, we involve them during the entire process of the development. So from the beginning up to the end. So we both should be satisfied by our job, because the designers are always involved and they still have the intellectual property of their projects. And we select the most interesting ideas following. Today we didn't have time to describe, to talk about that, but Alberto invented and not invented, but he made clear his personal successful formula, where he found out 4 basic pillars to evaluate a good project of design. And the pillars are the function, the price, the communication and language, and the parameter that we call sensoriality, memory, and imaginary. So that tries to measure the poetic value of an object, the communication, the communicative, like a sign, a status or style, symbol value of an object, and also the functional value of an object. We try to analyze which level of quality a new idea is bringing to us through this selection. But of course, the last 2 parameters, the communication and language and the sensoriality, memory, and imaginary, are the most focused one into which we are working on.
And our last question for today, before we wrap up, what advice would you give to students who might be working on projects that have tight parameters or tight guidelines, but want to still maintain the creativity and style in many ways that Alessi does as well?
Well, the suggestion I personally give to the students is, first of all, to learn the history of design, and to learn and to be open-minded, to see the different aspects of design and very different approaches. But at least I invite them always to find their own way to work, because design is a matter of discipline. Is a discipline which is starting from an artistic point and is able to create a deep link with people, is a way to communicate with people. And as more you are original, as more you are personal, as more you are real, as more you are able to touch people. And so I invite them at a certain point to find their own way of expressing themselves and to investigate deeply inside of them, which are the main values that they would like to bring to the future generations of people.
Yes, if I can add,
Yes.
I think the curiosity, because I remember Achille Castiglioni usually repeat that to be a good designer, you have to be curious to everything. And also a multidisciplinary curiosity approach. It's better if you read, if you go to the cinema, listen music. I remember once I went in Paris to visit an exhibition dedicated to Jean Nouvel, the architect, and I remembered it was created by Nouvel himself. And I remember at the entrance of this exhibition, like an introduction, there was a room completely covered by photos that he shooted since he was a teenager. She was at the high school, and not only about architectures, but about everything from art to landscape. Of course, there were a lot of buildings and architectures. And I noticed, I study philosophy and anthropology, so I study, my background was very far from design, and but when I started to work in Alessi and having the first contact with designers, I noticed that they are really curious, and yes, that's all. Sorry.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, both of you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you haven't already, you can check out all of the sessions planned for this week and register for more of the 2022 Virtual Fellowship using the links in chat or at theoriginalamericas.com. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.